Social anxiety disorder is characterized by excessive and persistent fear and avoidance of situations that involve social interaction and evaluation by others. It is the most common anxiety disorder and the third most common psychological disorder. And I would say many people also have subclinical levels of this. Arguably, almost everyone experiences a degree of this at times and quite strongly at other times. It shows up in things like fear of public speaking, fear of showing embarrassing anxiety symptoms in public, fear of choking, eating, spilling food in public, signing documents, doing work in front of other people, doing tasks in front of other people in case we get them wrong, fear of being watched in different contexts by people, fear of crowds, fear of using public toilets, fear of parties, social contexts, can show up in the workplace. So really, it's anywhere where we're fearful that we'll make mistakes, we'll embarrass ourselves, we'll show anxiety symptoms, we'll be less good at our performance because of anxiety. And really, at the heart of it is this core fear that everyone has, really, around being rejected, being left isolated and alone, being sort of judged and moving down a social hierarchy, and ultimately being isolated from a group and having to survive on our own, which for our ancestors would have been really dangerous, if not, the end of most people's lives. So it's really, some people call it a disorder of shame rather than anxiety. So it's around, I'm not good enough, I'm not showing up well enough, talking well enough, interesting enough. Uh, and um, it's something I've experienced a lot throughout my life, almost. Some of my earliest social memories are social anxiety. I remember it going where, far back, and many children that were maybe characteristically shy and reserved, and especially around others or around groups. And a lot of my panic disorder actually first showed up in social context. So school assemblies, going out to see things with an audience, groups, public speaking. And yeah, I remember some times where, um, you can't talk, you're going red, you're shaking, you can't find your words, you're blanking, and then that makes you feel like everyone's judging you more, and it becomes this sort of negative feedback loop, which sort of amplifies the social anxiety. And then the obvious safety behaviors we start to avoid. We start to either build in ways to be able to escape and get out of it, or avoid things altogether, or we control certain scenarios about the context to try to make it easy. I would always sit on the end of a row. I would, have certain things to distract myself and try to, hold on to certain things to squeeze them, or things like that. Or you would just withdraw. And for me, I would socially withdraw. I'd become very quiet. I would listen more, not share, not talk, avoid public speaking wherever I could. I remember times of public speaking when your legs are shaking and you can't say your words, and you feel like everyone in the audience is sort of locked in on you and judging you. And it can also trigger the inner critic, where you're very hard on yourself for this. I certainly was judging and criticizing myself for that sort of behavior. It can make you disjointed in your social action. So I remember times like with family, friends. I remember one time when someone reached in for a handshake to say goodbye, and I sort of leaned in and hugged this person. And right away I realized they weren't trying to hug me; they were trying to shake my hand. And this guy's hand was sort of trapped, and I was awkwardly hugging him, and I was going red and thinking, God, I better let go soon. But this is so embarrassing. and then let go, and then as quick as I could try to get out of the room. I'm laughing because that's my own experience. Obviously, this is not a funny thing at all, and it can put people's lives on hold. I've worked with people who will avoid all kinds of social contact, and nowadays it's easier to do that because we have our computers and we can retreat to rooms and avoid things. But in when I was younger, we didn't have so many opportunities for that. So in some ways, it forced me to face it quite a bit. At the same time, it's been there throughout my life and has been a huge difficulty for me a lot of the time. And so I wanted to look at this topic and think about what we can take from acceptance and commitment therapy, compassion focused therapy, other sources, other ideas around social anxiety, to try to work with this, to try and improve things. So here are some of my key ideas really of social anxiety and how to work with it. So I guess number one is it relates greatly to where our attention is directed. So, what often happens in a social context is we go into it with some anxiety, then our attention becomes threat focused and monitoring of these symptoms. It really locks in and notices every sign of anxiety. Our hand is a little bit shaking and it seems like it's going like this. We're a little bit red in the face and it seems like we're bright red. We're sweating and it seems like everyone can see and we're covered in sweat. Um, we feel like we need to go to the bathroom and we think we're gonna, embarrass ourselves in front of people unless we escape and get away. When really it's just the pressure of anxiety in our system, really. Um, and as soon as we're out of that context, we won't need to go to the bathroom again. We feel like we're stuttering our words, and then our attention goes on it, and it seems like we're stuttering every word and getting everything wrong. If you watch the video back, there'd just be some minor signs of stress, and we might just be missing the odd word. Many people wouldn't even notice. So what really happens is as our attention biases towards this, it amplifies these symptoms and then it becomes this negative spiral again that we start to get more anxious, we make more mistakes or show more symptoms, and it becomes this downward sort of spiral. And we also can bias towards what we're seeing in other people. So we think we see judgment where really someone is just confused or distracted. They're off in their own head. They're not listening to us, not because they think we're boring, but because they don't have a very focused mind and they're off ruminating, worrying, thinking about other things. Most people aren't very good listeners, and most people do respond to people who have signs of social dominance. So people who go into the room and have the body language that commands authority, that talk in certain ways, that have a core belief that I deserve to be in this room and that my point of view is important and needs to be heard. People will often attend to those people more. It doesn't say anything about you. It doesn't mean necessarily that they're judging you. It's just a human animal sort of instinct to follow the dominant people and listen to them more. And so social anxiety can put us into submissive body language that then means people don't listen and we notice it more. So all of these things, our attention gets locked onto things that amplify social anxiety. So what we want to do is use a tool like dropping anchor on this channel to acknowledge those symptoms or manifestations of social anxiety, and then to refocus on where we are and what we're doing, to get more attention into listening, more attention into talking, what we're saying, to be really present with the people we're with. And the better we get at that, that alone can be a huge antidote. So we're not distracting from the symptoms, we're allowing them in our awareness, but our key attention is on the person we're talking to, or the people we're talking to, or the room, the space we're in, rather than just being threat focused on us. It's sort of broader, wider, able to take in different pieces of information. So really practicing dropping anchor a lot, practicing it in social context, very brief version, a brief acknowledge, brief come back to your body, or even just leave the middle part of dropping anchor out and just acknowledge these symptoms and then refocus on those people around you, what you're saying, what you're hearing. That's what I use a lot. I acknowledge the anxiety and I focus out. And it doesn't mean we won't be anxious. At times, I certainly get anxiety in social context still. It's just much easier to be with it. I'm less judgmental, less critical, less hyper focused on it. And I know that it will go through this sort of wave where it might be a little bit harder at the beginning, but then it'll get easier over time. And this attentional skill really helps you ride through it to the point where people will often say to me they feel or think that I'm very calm and confident public speaking or social context, when really I know at the beginning I was quite anxious in that context. Sometimes it shows still, and that's okay as well. I'm going to be kind to myself if it does show. So really that attentional skill and practicing that and getting our attention and our thinking. So our thinking might be looping on the anxiety symptoms and judging and amplifying and worrying and ruminating. So we want to get our attention and our thinking onto the social context because thinking helps, right? We need to be making sense of what people are saying. Sometimes we're thinking about what the context is of what someone's saying, what it means in our life, what we could offer and deliver as well. And we have this flexible attention that's listening and making sense of what the person's saying, but also coming back to our perspective, what we want to share, and we want to be able to dance that dance of thoughts and attention in a social context. So we want to go after the attentional monitoring um, processes. So when we're hyper vigilant on ourselves or the threat in the social context, we also want to go after our mental rumination, worry, analysis, and other mental processes that are trying to control the scenario, trying to predict threat, trying to avoid or escape. And some of that is under our conscious control, and we are actively worrying and planning and thinking about escape and thinking about things we want to avoid. And then some of that is the intrusive automatic fears of what could go wrong in the social context. And really, we want to use the ACT skills of diffusion to notice that, to be able to let go of the experiential avoidance techniques of worry, rumination, judgment, analysis, that kind of thing. So to let go of that active engagement in the social anxiety and the fear, and instead get our attention, get our mind diffused from our thoughts and our attention into the experience more and more. And that will help. And also to go after those physical experiential avoidance techniques of literal avoidance, not going to these things, avoiding them completely or controlling some of the safety behaviors when we're in them so we can escape or we can minimize social danger, being quiet, not saying as much, not sharing our true opinions, not being assertive with people, not negotiating our needs to be met, this kind of thing. So we want to go after those mental cognitive safety behaviors or experiential avoidance, the attentional ones, the scanning, checking, monitoring in ourselves and others, and then the behavior in the world as well. And where we can let go of those processes easily, just naturally let go and instead go towards values where they are more automatic, the attention checking or the mental rumination, then work our diffusion skills, work our noticing of feelings, acknowledging feelings, refocusing back. So using diffusion and acceptance from ACT to work on that, and then present moment attention as the antidote, the thing where we want to have more of our attention. And even to the point of using some of that anxiety and channeling it into our behavior, into how we talk and how we express ourselves, letting it animate us and give us more energy and more attention to put into the situation, whilst we purposely slow down and not speak the way that anxiety gives us the urge to speak or act. That can be really helpful. Compassion is a huge support. As I said, social anxiety is really a shame disorder. And what we know from compassion focused therapy is that really working on this means improving self-compassion. That's really the origin of compassion focused therapy, is around how much shame can be in people experiencing psychological distress, and that we need to look at, why we struggle with self-compassion, what's in our history around that, and then increasing it. And then it's another one for me that was huge. As a kid, I was so self-critical and wanting a different experience, not wanting to feel anxious in front of other people that I wanted to impress, and places I wanted to seem like I belonged there, and had a place and things to say. And I was so critical around it. Really, self-compassion is key. And self-compassion to the point where even if I mess up, even if I am embarrassing myself, I say the wrong thing, or I show embarrassing signs of anxiety, and I'm shaking and red in the face, and if I worry about needing the bathroom, or having a panic attack in that context, or any of those embarrassing signs of anxiety, actually, even that I'm okay with. Even if I have a panic attack, I'm going to be compassionate to myself. Even if I can't make it to the bathroom and it isn't just anxiety and I really do need to go, I'm going to be kind to myself. Um, if I make a mistake, if I say the wrong thing, all of these things, I'm going to be self-compassionate. So self-compassion really to that feared outcome. And Chris Germer talks about his journey with social anxiety, public speaking anxiety, shame, particularly public speaking anxiety, and a lot of pressure on himself as a professor at Harvard and having to talk well. And he talks about this in his book. And really, what he found with the key ingredients was so helpful was acceptance of the anxiety, acceptance of the symptoms and signs of anxiety, even if they're embarrassing. Then to have a clear goal around what you're talking about, to know what are the key messages and things you want to get across. So this could be in public speaking, but it could be also in a social context, the type of person you want to be, the way you want to put your values into behavior, have those goals key. And then really compassion for himself and for the audience. So doing a little bit of loving kindness practice at the beginning for you and for the people you're talking to, or doing the breathing in compassion one for me, breathing out compassion to other people, compassionate self-talk moments of that where you can fit that in, alongside the anxiety and worry, and really having a compassionate motivation for the people that you're with, realizing that they, just like you, want happiness and freedom from suffering. Just like you, they have difficulties in their life. They are struggling with certain things. And even if they are very confident, very good socially, they'll also have vulnerability and difficulty. And to have compassion to that. And you can even share your compassionate vulnerability. You can even describe that right now I'm quite anxious, but it's okay. I can keep going, keep talking, or I want to be here. But you can name it. And, really most people will be kind and supportive. And the small subgroup of people who will be judgmental and critical, we have to ask ourselves, do I really want to be friends with those people? Do I really care with what they think of me? Or do I want to surround myself with people that even if I'm embarrassingly anxious, they're going to love and support me and be kind, and really doesn't say anything of my worth if I'm showing symptoms of anxiety in public. Um, so cultivating compassion, short compassion practices, setting a compassionate motivation as you go into an activity, bring in your compassionate self, this idea from CFT of this courageous, wise, and caring part of myself to support me going through it. And then compassion during and after the event as well. If my mind starts looping over and evaluating how I did and what did I say the wrong things, okay, let's acknowledge that and notice that that really isn't helpful. Let's try to diffuse and let go of that rumination and analysis and threat monitoring where I can, and instead come back to where I am with a compassionate perspective. So really, we want to bring compassion and mindfulness into before, as we have the anticipatory anxiety, during, as we are talking and listening and trying to work with the anxiety, and then afterwards, as we maybe do the self evaluation and monitoring of how we got on, or things like shame attacks. People will talk about they get hit with shame afterwards. Let's use that as the alarm clock to be self compassionate. Gradual exposure is a key thing, building it up. If we're highly social anxious, then let's build up a hierarchy and very gently start to face it. If we're less intensely socially anxious, then, we can maybe launch right into exposure a bit more and do more. And sometimes the exposure is just going to things again, meeting people, public speaking again, doing certain social events. The first step might be just getting there and then practicing my listening skills. And then the next level might be going there and actually sharing and contributing. And then the next level might be trying to talk in front of a group and then public speaking. So you can think about how you gradiate that exposure and work at a level till you have your skills in place, your psychological flexibility skills and compassion skills, and you feel more of your attention is there, less is hyper focused on your symptoms, and then move up the hierarchy and progress. And then when you're more flexibly up the hierarchy, you can jump around, do easier things, harder things, push it. And you can even do exposure to the worst case scenarios. So in CBT, they will often get you to do embarrassing things and to make mistakes and say the wrong thing and ask silly questions or do drop things or do silly things like that. So you can do that. And sometimes that's helpful. I've also found clients where that isn't really helpful because it's a very specific context where the social anxiety shows up. So they're actually okay doing those embarrassing things with people they don't know in public places, but in another context with people that matter in the workplace or somewhere like that, it becomes more difficult. So sometimes those worst case exposures, shame attacking exposures, as they say in REBT. So in Albert Ellis's REBT, they have an award for who could do the most embarrassing exposure each year, and so there can be a place for that for sure. In ACT, we call it the reverse compass, where you do the opposite of what your mind's telling you to do. Your mind's telling you to avoid. You practice doing the opposite to that. So that can be good if when you're ready to do that, when your skills are strong enough. As I said earlier, acceptance of the worst case scenario and compassion to the worst case scenario um, linked to the gradual exposure. Really we sometimes don't we retain anxiety because we've still got this core fear below it of social shame and rejection, and we've also got these fears of these embarrassing side effects of anxiety. So the more we can get a compassionate acceptance, a true self-acceptance of these things, and the worst case scenario, these side effects, so that I truly feel if I go into a context, get my words wrong, embarrass myself, shake, sweat, wet myself, need to rush to the bathroom, feel sick in front of people, whatever way it's showing up, or just forget my words, blank out, can't think of what to say, whatever version comes up, I know I'm going to be compassionate, kind, and accepting of this, and I'm not going to reject myself and leave myself here. I'm going to be there for myself and me in that experience, no matter what happens. Then that can really help a lot, I think, when because gradual exposure doesn't always work. Sometimes we're left still with fears and anxiety. And sometimes that's because exposure works, and then we have gaps in it, like COVID showed. Like a lot of people were very confident socially, and then they had a long period of avoidance, and then suddenly it was quite hard to go back to that. So our brain can reignite fear systems. They can come back in, or sometimes they remain. Like a lot of public speakers will always still have some anticipatory anxiety at the beginning, but they just get better at handling that. So I would say that the best goal is to be more accepting, more able to handle the anxiety, and to be more present in the context rather than to try and get rid of anxiety, because that then again it says to our mind anxiety is the bad guy. Look out for it. If we have any of it, it's really bad, and it means therapy's not working or whatever. So really, a better goal is to go, let's just get very good at handling anxiety in social contexts and being me and being the person I want to be. And then the side effect is that social anxiety will typically get easier. And that's my experience. I certainly still experience it now, but I feel much better at handling it, much more comfortable to be with it, much more accepting of the worst case scenario, more compassionate around the core fears. Um, and really, these core fears are at the heart of it, of rejection, isolation, being thrown out of the group. And Matt Lieberman's research has shown that, that activates the same pain circuits as physical pain, social pain, and social rejection, isolation, and things going wrong activate that. So it's really, there's a primitive level of us really wanting to be accepted and to really be part of our group. So to be compassionate to that, and also compassionate to our history, if there are things in the past that have triggered this, experiences of shame. I certainly had a lot of them, of times at school and memories that really sit under this social anxiety. And at times when I'm in the context and I look at my experience, I can even see the flashing of the memory of the fear of embarrassment and rejection and getting things wrong. So being ready for that, and then going back with compassion and trauma work to work on those sort of historical things, and working with a therapist if you need to. I think we need a strong motivation. We need our core values, our compassionate motivation, and a sense of workability. Workability is looking at how this behavior works for me in the long run. And the reality is that if I do avoidance, if I do safety behaviors, try to control things because of social anxiety, gradually my world will get smaller. And at first, I'll feel a relief of not having to face the anxiety. And then suddenly, the world gets so small in the comfort zone that I start to feel depressed and low, and really it's not workable in the long run. My life gets shut down, and I'm going to have to face these things anyway. Life will give me context where I have to go into groups, or I have to meet people, I have to do things. And we don't want that to come at the end of a life of avoidance. We want that to come now, so that we're really good at facing it now, get much more comfortable, and then at the end of our life we're not looking back with regret. Instead, we're going, yeah, I went for it, I tried my best here, and I did what I could, and I didn't just stay in the comfort zone. Doesn't mean you have to push, 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 but you want to be gradually building these things, identifying goals that reflect these values, and this goal of increasing exposure to this with skills. Um, so I would set some goals, set some weekly goals, monthly goals. What are you going to do more of? Where are you going to get to there? Look at the core values. What parts of your life are important? What does this cost me? What do I want more of in my life? Rather than avoidance of anxiety. It's worth facing anxiety for a relationship, for my work, for connection, for fun and pleasure, and being with people. And then the final one is using this skill of what's called watch your mouth. So watch your mouth is often talked about in ACT around anger, and anger controls us and gets us to be snappy and aggressive and things like that. But with anxiety, we want to do the same thing. How can I use watch my mouth to be very mindful of what I'm saying, even when I'm anxious, to do the opposite of anxiety, to follow the value of wanting to be connected and calm. So slowing down, having my attention with the person, not rushing my words, speaking from my abdomen rather than up in my throat, and being very kind of frantic, and slow down. So follow the values, not the mood and the emotion. Urge surf the impulse to get away or to speak in a certain way, do certain things, and really be mindful of the thoughts and feelings and words that I'm about to speak as I'm speaking, how they are being received. So I've got a practice of watch your mouth on this channel. Go and watch that, and then use that with anxiety. I find that very helpful to slow down, be mindful, be present, do the opposite of what anxiety is getting me to do, to talk very fast and try and get away as quick and finish my words and get out of there. So slow down, have a moment. If people aren't listening to me, fine. I'm going to be kind to myself and supportive, and I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to savor and enjoy that connection and that time together, rather than be controlled by anxiety. So give these tools a go. Have a look at the social skills on the channel, see if any of that's helpful. The different tools we have here, and put them into the social anxiety context and see where you get to.